Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, where trusted leaders bring biblical insights to important issues to help you stand for truth and effect godly change in our nation and in our world.
Welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show. I'm Richard Harris, your host, and just very excited to have you joining us today. Did you know that 700 million people around the world live on less than $2.15 income a day? The problem of world hunger is a staggering one, it's world poverty. But what if I were to tell you today that the solution to world poverty could also make America exceedingly wealthy? My guest today is Varin, a young man that I recently met who happens to be a Charis Bible College student, a remarkable individual who has started multiple businesses in his life, has studied the issue of poverty, especially in developing nations, and has pioneered some solutions and ideas on this that are absolutely exciting and inspiring. Let's talk about poverty for just a second. Extreme poverty is hard to define. But the experts seem to define it at somewhere around less than $2 a day. Imagine if all you got paid was $2 per day, $10 a week, right? Less than $1,000 a year as your complete income. And off of that, you're expected to support not only yourself, but your family. The vast majority of extreme poverty exists in sub-Saharan Africa. People there are suffering from a lack of food, obviously, or even essential nutrients, clean water, clothing, housing, medical treatment, education. In most of these places, there's very little opportunity for economic growth because of many different factors. Government corruption is one of the biggest ones. No education, basic ignorance and illiteracy, and no access to capital. No access to capital, what do you mean? I'm talking about that even if someone wanted to start an enterprise or a business, they can't get a loan. They can't get the money that they need to begin it. Even the smallest amounts sometimes are difficult, often are difficult because of high interest rates and other factors. And then when we bring in the traditional approach to world poverty, brought in by well-meaning mostly Western nations, of grants and other subsidies and handouts and these kinds of things, food and all this sort of thing that's provided at no cost and virtually no risk to the impoverished people. The problem with it is that it may provide a level of temporary relief from the symptoms of poverty, but it creates a welfare society. It creates a dependency and a dependency culture. It fosters a mindset of dependency, and it does not provide the people with the knowledge and the attitude and the mindset that they need in order to build a thriving economy, thriving businesses, and a thriving culture. Since the 1950s, we have seen in the world a massive decline in poverty. We've seen a decline since the 1990s worldwide, down 36% to 12% living in extreme poverty now today. But that's due not to increased benevolence like handouts, grants, financial aid, and that sort of thing. It's due to economic development, primarily the economic development of China and Southeast Asia, due to international trade, technological advancements. These technological advancements that we have seen since the 1990s have opened up marketplaces and trade and commerce around the world. People on one side of the world can now sell goods and services to people on the other side of the world without having sophisticated shipping, sophisticated communications, or logistical, apparatus. It's also made possible digital enterprises that are accessible to everybody with a cell phone. So it has really, the increased trade with China and Southeast Asia has done a lot to alleviate poverty. In the long term, however, We have to ask the question, the United States of America remains the most prosperous nation in the world, where our economy generates basically 30 to 36 trillion dollars every year in wealth. We generate 24% of the world's wealth, but we have only 4% of the world's population. And the timeline of history shows, let me just go a little deeper and broader here. The timeline of history shows that where the gospel goes, prosperity follows. If you look at the nations of the earth that were colonized or settled really by Protestant Christians out of Europe, you can see prosperity and great economic development, technological advancement, and freedom. Where you see Islam, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but where you see Islam, you see poverty, generally speaking, except for the wealth of oil. Industry is not the cause of the wealth of the Middle East. But even in non-Protestant Christian nations, in other words, Catholic, you see depressed economies, difficulty generating wealth, and so on. It is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the principles of the Protestant Reformation that produce the mindset that lead to the rule of law, the elimination of corruption, the ideas of equality of all men and individual accountability, the contract law, which is essentially individual accountability, the rights of the individual, and so on. All of these principles lead to economic prosperity, including personal responsibility. The Protestant Reformation produced a love and a respect for knowledge, produced the scientific revolution, the technological revolution, the industrial revolution. You see, but in China and in Southeast Asia, especially in China and the communist Asian countries, you do see increased gross domestic product. But you're also seeing increasing wealth inequality and a very powerful elite with centrally managed economies. And as a result of this, they've tried to manage their economies centrally. And a lot of what has happened in these countries is this sort of government-driven enterprise. And to finance it, they've borrowed sums of money that are staggering. China's national debt today, we think of China as an economic powerhouse, which it is, but it's also suffering from an incredible load of debt. Their national debt is 300 times their gross domestic product. Western nations, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, now the United Kingdom, and others, as they have become fully socialist countries, are now in serious financial trouble with increasing debt, the inability to pay for all the social programs that they now depend on. So this is a very complex and difficult challenge, world poverty. The bottom line objective here is to, in developing nations and in all nations around the world, is to establish the conditions that will lead to widespread opportunity for business development and financial growth. So solving poverty, solving world poverty, of course we know we'll never solve it, right? There will always be poor people. But we can, through lots of different ways, help to push back suffocating poverty in the world. It's not enough just to give things, give money, give food, give clothing, much of which goes to corrupt government leaders and gang leaders and tribal leaders and things like that, and doesn't actually help the suffering. It's not enough, and furthermore, it's just a temporary relief. We have to equip them to support and prosper themselves. As with most things, the solutions are best, they work best when they're implemented not by the government, but actually by the private sector. One of the best and most promising solutions is something called microfinance. Microfinance is an exciting, relatively new strategy. It's especially exciting when it's coupled with evangelism and Christian discipleship. Microfinance says, we're going to come in and provide you with, or give you an opportunity to apply for a small loan. Sometimes it's just $100 or even less, maybe $200 to buy a fruit stand, to buy a cart, to buy a couple of fishing nets, or whatever the investment is that will enable that individual to begin to generate income that exceeds his needs. So microfinance, when combined with financial accountability, right? So if you have a lender, that lender is going to demand on certain reports, payment of loans on time, and accountability. But it's also when combined with Christian discipleship, you'll have accountability for mental, emotional, and spiritual growth as well. So, a small loan in an impoverished nation, to an individual in an impoverished nation, can make the difference between death and life, between extinction and the building of generational wealth. But legal and financial structures in the United States of America and around the world impede these investments in major ways. And we need to begin to understand what those impediments are. The fact of the matter is that the United States has fallen behind. We have historically been the most benevolent nation in the history of the world, and we still are. We give more in foreign aid than any other country, and there's no one else that even comes close. When there's an earthquake, when there's a famine, when there's a tsunami, who do they come to? Who do they look to? They look to the United States. When there's a need for world peace, who do they look to? The United States. Donald Trump recently exposed through Elon Musk the corruption and wickedness of the grant program inside of USAID as it's being used to fund all kinds of ungodly activity and LGBT, can I call it just garbage, in the billions of dollars. But the point is the United States has always given a lot to help other countries. But that methodology of just giving money away, as I said, does not produce lasting change. It's going to take the private sector to produce this, probably in cooperation with the government. But there are structures in our financial and government systems today, including the Federal Reserve, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Internal Revenue Service, USAID, and other branches of our federal government that actually make it difficult for Americans to invest overseas. Now, if you look at China, one of the things that has given them a rapid acceleration strategically, putting them on par or close to on par with the United States in many measures, is their strategy originally called, I believe it was called the Belts and Roads Initiative, where they are going into third world developing countries and they are literally building roads and bridges and buildings and hospitals and these kinds of things, infrastructure for these nations. Now, they found that the Belts and Roads Initiative was not really fully developed or fine-tuned, so now they have another name for it. But the point of the matter is that the Chinese are building alliances and financial allegiances, if you will, and relationships with countries all over the globe. Through this, these countries are beginning to develop, and their loyalty is not to the United States of America and freedom, it's to the corrupt communist elite dictators of Red China. And so it's not a system that will produce long-term freedom and wealth or long-term alleviation of extreme poverty. But it will enhance and is enhancing the power of the largest enemy of freedom in the world today, Communist China. And so we need to take a good look at this as Americans today and ask ourselves the tough question. Are there laws and regulations and systems in place in our nation, in our laws, that are designed to protect the financial elite here and to protect the wealth of this country, that are actually impeding our ability to invest overseas? And by the way, our next guest is going to talk about this in great detail. There is an immense amount of profit to be earned overseas. And so if we can free up, his point is, I believe, I'll let him say it in those words, but if we can free up the wealth of the United States so that it can be invested not just here, but overseas, we will see, he believes, a massive return on that investment that will make the United States even richer than it has ever been before. And this is not for the sake of us getting rich in and of itself, but we do want the freest nation and the most Christian nation in the history of the world to also be the most prosperous nation in the history of the world, because it's that prosperity in part, that prosperity that has given the United States the great influence that we have, the great influence that we have to stand up for freedom, to defend the helpless, to stop, atrocities and genocide, to, help Israel, to do all the good things that the United States has done throughout history. If we think that financial wealth doesn't matter, then we haven't learned very much. One of the reasons Donald Trump is proving so successful in his international relations is he's coupling the concept of trade with the concept of diplomacy and military defense. And as a result of that, he's captured the ears and the imagination of the leadership around the world, because it's a new way of thinking, at least for us. And so I think this is an exciting new frontier. There are great opportunities here. And here to talk with us more about it today is my new friend, Clark Varin. Clark is the founder of a ministry and the author of a book called Teach a Man to Fish. You might remember this, that title comes from the saying that you can, what is the saying? It says, give a man to fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. His ministry is dedicated to bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ to the poorest places on the earth. And since 2018, Clark has managed an investment firm that invests microloans into poor communities to turn slums into thriving areas of commerce. And he's here to share with us the political and economic challenges that he's faced as an international investor, and what he believes is slowing down American investment and potentially putting the United States at risk of total economic collapse. That's right. So I'm really happy today to welcome to the Truth and Liberty Show, Clark Varin. So we're going to take a short break here, and we'll be right back with this exciting new guest and friend of Truth and Liberty. Are you passionate about standing for truth in the culture, but don't know how to get started? Well, Truth and Liberty, our mission is to educate, unify, and mobilize the body of Christ to stand for truth in the public square. And as part of our mission, we provide you with an amazing array of resources on our website. And our website has just been revamped, remodeled, and retooled to be user-friendly. And I'm so excited about it because I believe that there's nothing like it out there anywhere. I want to encourage you today to go to truthandliberty.net and check out the Resources Center and the Get Equipped Center. On our Resources Center, you will find hundreds of links, hundreds of videos, articles, blogs, even America's original founding documents can be found on Truth and Liberty's Resources Center. It's searchable by topic, preset topic, or you can put in a custom search to find exactly what you need and what you're interested in. In the Get Equipped section, we link you to tools created by our strategic partners, including Pray, Vote, and Engage tools. We culture impact teams, civic action teams, biblical citizenship in modern America, biblical worldview training, and more. So go today to truthandliberty.net and find what you need to get equipped to stand for truth in the public square. Welcome back to Truth and Liberty. I am really excited now today to be able to share with you a brand new friend and guest here on Truth and Liberty. Probably his greatest accomplishment is being a Charis Bible College second-year student. I'm just kidding. He's actually an entrepreneur and author and just a great fellow, brother in the Lord. Clark Varin, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it.
Clark, you are definitely an interesting guy. You're an entrepreneur. You've traveled the world. You are like a voracious reader, and you have a knowledge of international finance greater than guys that are twice your age. Man, tell us about your journey here. Let me just lay a little bit more to this. You've got a new book that's out. It's called Teach a Man to Fish.
Correct.
What is this book, just in a nutshell? Tell us about it.
So, Teach a Man to Fish, the subtitle is Good News for the World's Poorest. And there's a lot of bad news out there in the world about things that are happening, with wars and crime and all that stuff. But this is supposed to be some good news. It's supposed to be some heartfelt news of how the world is actually transforming for good, specifically among the world's poorest people. And that has been something that humanity has been trying to address for decades. We have donated trillions of dollars to try to alleviate poverty. And for decades, we actually saw it get worse. And this book actually answers those questions. First of all, why was it getting worse back then? And what can we actually do in order to not only help alleviate poverty, but also to further the gospel? So I threw that subtitle in there, The Good News for the World's Poorest, as a subtle hint towards the gospel.
Yeah. Oh man, my head's already swimming with questions here, but I want to make sure people know kind of how it is that you came to this place of writing this book. I mean, now you and I met not too long ago, and you were sharing with me how, when you were in college, you were already an entrepreneur. Tell us about that. I think you were ranked as one of the top 35 entrepreneurs under the age of 35 at University of Minnesota?
Yeah,
and
when I was 22.
When you were 22?
Yeah.
So as for us slackers, I promise you at 22 I was not starting new businesses, but tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I remember when I was 18, I was sitting down at the Applebee's interview table, and I looked around. I had already worked at Applebee's in my hometown, not in my college. And so it was like an easy job for me to get. And I remember looking around and I was like, I am never doing this again. And I walked out before the interview ever even happened. And I was like, I'm going to start a business. And I started thinking about what kind of business do I want to start? And the first question that I had was the question that most people think about when they want to start a company is like, how do I want to make money? And so I spent probably like 3 or 4 months asking myself that question, how do I want to make money? And then I started to flip the question around because I was coming up with all these ideas. And I realized it's like, I don't have the purpose or the passion, the drive to actually like take these things to execution and like put in all the effort that I need to in order to make this a success. So I flipped the question around. Instead of asking how do I want to make money, I started asking myself, what would I do if money didn't matter? Right?
Okay.
And that started to help me understand what are my true passions and things like that. And I was like, I'd probably go camping. Like, I love camping. I love nature. I'd probably travel. And that led me to start Travel Young. And Travel Young was a travel agency where I started guiding other college kids on trips, first to local state parks, then to national parks across the country. We did big spring break trips. I brought 45 people to Utah, to Zion and Bryce Canyon over spring break. And then we went international. And when we started to go international is when I started to actually see the kind of poverty that I'm addressing today. And that really was a big part of the inspiration for me wanting to figure out, like, how do I help these people? I cannot believe that some parts of the world are still, in these kinds of conditions.
Yeah, and didn't you take like a long time off just to travel and go to different parts of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I ran a travel agency, and it's kind of funny. Like, I wasn't always guiding trips. But I did a lot of personal trips. And so the trip that I did that actually introduced me to Uganda, where I started my company, I first flew into Turkey, and I met a buddy in Turkey, and we spent a couple of days in Istanbul, and then I flew down to Egypt, and then we did a 5-star Nile River cruise, which, by the way, I highly recommend if you ever get the chance. It's actually really affordable because Egypt's a super affordable travel country. But I went through Egypt and then ended up in Uganda, and I actually talk about that story in my book because it was going to Istanbul was like, okay, this is kind of poor, Going to Egypt was like, this is poorer. And then going to Uganda was like, this is poorest. And in my mind, I didn't understand the differences of like poor, poorest until I really started to research poverty and understand like, what are the living conditions like for those people? So yeah, I did quite a bit of traveling individually as well.
What are the living conditions like for the poorest of the poor, Clark?
I mean, I remember there was one time, my business partner, his name is Moses, right?
We're going down the Nile? Oh, sorry.
It's so funny. We did whitewater raft the Nile together. Yeah, with Moses. I whitewater rafted the Nile. We did not split the waters though.
In an ark of bulrushes.
But Moses fell in the waters. Let's just say that. But I remember I was in Moses' hometown, so he actually grew up here, and we're driving up to his school because he started this really amazing nonprofit school. It's got 1,000 kids going to school there. And we're on this like windy dirt road up to the school in his home village. And there was like 3 or 4 girls who were carrying buckets of like those yellow buckets. I don't know if you've seen these in other countries before, but they're carrying buckets of water on their head. And they're probably like ages like 4, 6, and 8, something like that. And these are 3 girls who aren't able to go to school. They're spending their day collecting water from a dirty, like a river down, several miles away. I don't know how far it was. But a lot of people have to do an hour-long walk down to that river and back every single day. And then we stopped the car and I was like, Moses, I cannot see these people walking right in front of us. We got to come out. I got to help them, So I get out of the van and we start carrying their jugs for them up to their house. And we look inside of their house and their stove was a wood burning stove that was boiling a pot of beans. And then inside of their house, there was 1 bedroom. And so 3 kids shared 1 twin-size bed that was really just like a foam pad. And there was a bunch of junk around the house, but they had almost nothing of value at all. They lived off of the land. They picked the food that they would eat. They cooked everything over an open fire. And these are the types of people who are making like $2 or $3 a day. They don't really have anything to their name, and they have no way in order to generate income.
Yeah.
And that's where microloans come into play. Is like, if you have no way to generate income, what do? You're basically living off the land, right?
Yeah. And so when you say living off the land, it's not like they have a farm, right? What do you mean by that?
Well, thankfully, in their situation, yeah, they basically did have a bunch of farmland. So it wasn't like they were growing a farm to sell crops, but they had a banana tree that was making some food for them, But the worst conditions that I've ever seen were in Cité Soleil, which is a city in Haiti. Okay. It's a slum in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And when I was there, I remember walking down the street, there's like green slime that's in the sewage system and whatnot. There's a pig drinking out of that slime. So the people are eating the pig that's drinking slime out of sewage. There's like women that are sitting in front of their home and their face is like they're almost like stone. Like they're so hardened by the difficulty of their life and the hopelessness of their life and the pain that they suffer through every day and the constant hunger and things like that, where these people are just like, there's no hope for their future,
Right.
And the average income in Haiti is $400 a year, which is like $1 a day.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. And so you were saying micro loans can help these people.
Exactly.
Listen, let me go back to your book title for just a second, because it's called Teach a Man to Fish.
Yeah.
Obviously that comes from that saying, right?
Yeah.
If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. So tell me about, why did you call your book Teach a Man to Fish?
Yeah, and I add on top of that, if you teach a man to start a fishing business, you feed his whole village for multiple lifetimes.
Okay.
Right? So, so I call it Teach a Man to Fish because the approach that we have had when we're trying to help people in poverty for decades is that we go somewhere that's really poor. We have this heartfelt, I've got to do something in order to help these people, right? And then we end up telling them, well, maybe I can build you a well, or maybe I can do this for you, maybe I can do that for you. It ends up being the donor who's trying to figure out ways that would make them feel good or better about the situation. But the way that we actually need to approach this is go to these places and be like, how can I help you?
Yeah.
What are your dreams? What are your ambitions? What do you want to do? What are your ideas? We shouldn't be going to these poor countries where we don't know the people, we don't know the culture, we don't know the economy, trying to tell them what to do, right? We need to come as like curious students of like, what are the problems that you see? And how do we help you do that?
Yeah.
Microloans are how you do that. Microloans help empower dreams. And to give you an idea of how that works, when I was in Haiti, I spent a week looking at like all of this dire poverty that I had seen. And I knew that I wanted to do something. Like I went there with the intent to actually give a microloan. But even though that I had the intent to do that when I went down there, the amount that what I had seen just hit me in the gut, where it's like, I could not see any opportunity as this outsider. I couldn't see a place to invest, right? And at that point, I was like, man, what do? I just do the donation model again? That's obviously not working. But then I met this guy named John, and he was making $3 a day selling seashells on the beach. This is a perfect example of a guy who has nothing. He's living off the land. He's picking up seashells off the seashore, and he's selling them to tourists. So John's making $3 a day, and I asked John, what would you do if I gave you a loan? And how much would you need? And immediately John knew I would want $200 and I would buy a fishing net, which is part of the reason why I named the book Teach a Man to Fish, right? Because the first loan I ever gave was literally teaching a man to fish. So I gave John the $200 that he needed in order to buy the fishing net. And then 1 week later, John sends me a picture on WhatsApp, a net full of crab and lobster and a $20 bill. And in 1 week, John's income went from $3 a day to $20 a day. Wow. Because he had an income generating asset. He had a fishing net.
Just a fishing net.
Just a fishing net. But that fishing net was $200. Like he could never save.
He could probably ever save.
He would never be able to save that.
So Clark, okay, it's called a loan.
Yeah.
Right? So do you actually charge interest on it?
Yeah, you charge interest.
Okay, and he pays it off in installments or what?
Yep, so they pay it off in installments. Yeah. So with basically a few months after going to Haiti, I planted my company in Africa called Mavule. And so for the last 7 years, I've been running a microfinance institution where we're giving a couple $1 million a year of microloans to people in the poorest communities on earth. Those people, their incomes on average, like in Kosokoso, it's one of the largest slums in Africa. Their income on average goes from $2 a day to $5 a day in 12 months.
The average
$2 a day to $10 a day in 12 months.
And this is a town?
This is a almost 1 million person city where 600,000 people live on $2 a day.
Okay, so are you saying that your micro loans enabled the average income of that whole city to go up by, what was that again?
Average income of a borrower. So we didn't have enough money for the whole city. We would need a lot more money than we have right now.
So that's all right.
But we could do that. Like this is, at a smaller scale, we have doubled entire economies, like little slums, smaller ones, right?
Yeah.
Because the average income growth, once again, in Kosokoso, one of the poorest places in Uganda, went from $2 a day to $10 a day in 12 months. That's 5x income growth in 12 months.
And what kind of a difference does going from $2 to $10 a day make for those people that experience that?
It's complete life transformation. I mean, the first thing that these people really care about is they want to be able to eat 3 meals a day for them and their family, right? So we did an impact study to figure out what are people doing with the additional income that they're receiving, right? And where is that money going and how does it change their life? And what we found is that the average person who receives a microloan from us, knowing that our average microloan is only $150, right? That goes on to produce one job that then feeds a family of 5 people, right? Who previously were only eating like 2, sometimes even 1 meal a day. Now it's 5 people eating 3 meals a day, nutritious food, right? The average loan also helps put 3 kids in school. Now think about that compared to the donation model of like sponsoring a child. You can sponsor a child for maybe 1 semester, probably less, for $150, right? This is putting 3 kids in school for their entire education. Not because you're directly paying for their schooling, but because you're investing in the income of the parents. And their parents are working hard and generating money in order to send their kids to school. Okay,
so you make a microloan, but it's really only for some kind of business enterprise so that they can generate wealth. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, and then some people might be like, well, why charge them interest? That's not helping.
You have to.
Yeah, tell me why.
You have to. There's several reasons why. The first reason why is it makes it sustainable. Like, think about this for a second. Would you rather be able to help one person, or would you rather be able to help one person and then another person, and then another person, and then another person with the same amount of money, right? It makes it sustainable. The interest, 2/3 of the interest that we generate goes towards actually paying the operations of the organization. Now, banking in America, for example, right, is a pretty simple process. You typically go into the bank and you fill out the documents and whatnot. Banking, in our situation for a microfinance institution, in order for us to go collect that money, we literally have to go into like the boonies of this country on a little motorcycle and go out there and we go to the village and then we collect that money and then we go back. And there's a lot of expense because every single week we're doing that, right?
That's why regular banks aren't doing it.
Regular banks don't want anything to do with it. It's way too much work. It's not profitable enough for them. So one of them is it makes it sustainable, where it's like it actually pays for the operations, right? And then the other thing too is it changes the mindset. It changes the mindset of the borrower, because the borrower right? When they know I have to pay this back with interest, it immediately forces them to think about how can I produce a profit, because not only do I have to pay this back, but I have to make money in order to pay the interest back, and I have to make more on top of that, right? So it turns their mindset from this is a gift to this is an investment. And once it's an investment, then they actually go out and they build something, they build a business that changes their life. If we were to give even 0% interest loans, right? First of all, there's no accountability because they could just pay it back at whatever time they want because, there's 0% interest. Yeah, there's no penalty. But if we were to do that, then immediately they would be like, oh, this is a gift. And now all of a sudden there's a, I don't want to say that they would slack off, but they wouldn't work as hard.
Right.
It's the truth. They really wouldn't work as hard. What we're doing is we're incentivizing hard work for them to become self-sustaining entrepreneurs. We don't want to be their babysitter their entire life, and they don't want it either. They don't want to feel like beggars.
Right.
They want to be independent, and the way to make them feel independent is part of it. You have to charge them interest. They have to know this is an investment, and you're operating a business that's helping them, right? But they ultimately have to become independent at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, there's lots of people today, it's becoming socially acceptable and so on to support socialism, communism, this kind of thing, bashing on capitalism, as they call it. I don't use the word capitalism because it's from Karl Marx. It's actually free enterprise. But tell me what happens to the individual. Let's zero in on that because you referred to it a little bit. But if I go from receiving a gift to actually building something of my own that generates wealth and supports my family, what does that do to an individual's self-esteem and to his outlook on life, just for starters?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is that you're empowering their dreams.
Yeah.
They have their own ideas because God gave them those ideas. And so we're unlocking, by making these investments, we're unlocking the God-given potential of the bottom billion people on earth.
Wow. That's quite a vision. Let's unlock the potential of the bottom 1 billion people on planet Earth. So, Clark, let's first off, this book that you've written, Teach a Man to Fish. I've read part of it. Sorry, I haven't gotten through all of it yet. We just met this last week, but it's a really exciting book. Where can people get a copy of it?
So you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it, we have some bonuses if you buy it straight through our website. So you can go to our website. It's TAM2F.org/book. We'll take you directly to where you can purchase the book.
Okay.
So TAM2F, it's to teach a man, the number 2, and then F for fish.
Okay.
.org.
TAM2F.org.
Yeah.
Did I get it?
Yep, you got it.
Awesome. So you guys, you really need to check this out, get this book today. But let's go back to this question of global poverty for a minute, Clark. In your studies, in your efforts here, and everything you've been through, you I think, the Lord has sort of taken you to school in a way, right?
Yeah, he did.
He's given you his version of a master's degree in global finance.
Yeah.
Tell us what you've learned. Specifically, this is too big of a question, so break it down for us, okay? But you were telling me the other day there are a whole bunch of impediments. Well, I tell you what, why don't we start with, what is China doing today that is making them so, building so much loyalty for them around the world?
Yeah. I'm going to start at a different place.
Okay.
I'm going to start at a different place, and I'll get there, okay?
All right.
So look at the U.S. economy today right now. Look at the investment opportunities that exist today right now. If you look at the Warren Buffett stock indicator, it's saying our stock market is more overinflated than it ever has been in the history of the United States ever, right? It's more overpriced than ever before. We issued all this debt. We had the 2008 stuff really just got kicked down the road, and then we got the pandemic that issued all this other capital as well. And we just flooded the United States with all of this money, right? So stocks are overinflated. On bonds, your interest is getting eaten away by inflation, which thankfully is more under control now than it was, just a year or two ago. Gold is more overpriced than it's ever been in all of history ever. People are just trying to figure out, where do I put my money?
Yeah.
Real estate took a massive spike, never corrected, right? And so the question is, like, when you're looking at all of the places in order to invest in the United States, nothing really looks like a good deal, you know? And I know that there are still good deals out there or whatnot, but the general public, general population, the average retiree, how are they supposed to feel secure retiring in this kind of economic environment? Right?
Yeah.
The reason why, one of the reasons why all of those markets are super overinflated is because the United States is designed to keep capital in the United States. There are century-old laws that restrict capital from getting invested into other countries. These laws were invented during an economic climate where the US is the only place you'd want to do business, so nobody really cared about it, so that's just the way things are, is that we put up these barricades from capital flowing outside of the United States and getting invested into other countries. Now you mentioned China, right? China has a different philosophy. China has a much greater worldview, and honestly, they're a lot closer to their original roots of being a poor country, being a third world country just a couple decades ago. So they see the potential and they see the growth trends that are happening in places like Africa, you know, like the Middle East, like South America, and they're starting to look at, oh wow, all of these countries are growing at a similar type of rate as what China did. If you look at the GDP growth of the top 20 fastest growing countries in Africa, they're growing like 3 times faster than the United States, every single one of them. China, on the other hand, has organizations that are built into their government where they're like, if you want to go and do business in another country, we're going to fund you. We're going to send you. We're going to help you do that, as long as it aligns with the China's initiatives, right? As a country, we're going to send you to be able to do business in Africa. And I've seen this take place where there are real estate developments that are happening in Kampala, Uganda, which, by the way, is the fastest growing real estate market in the world. It's the fastest urbanizing city in the world. So there are real estate opportunities that exist in Kampala, Uganda, that I have been to that are run by the Chinese, where they're building all this like massive amounts of like middle class housing because there's a really quickly growing middle class in Africa. And those, I started asking some questions about the numbers and things of what does it take in order to build this and what are the rents and things like that. And I can fairly certainly assume that they're making triple digit returns on their cash.
Yeah.
Well, right?
Okay.
Right? So China is sending entrepreneurs to these countries to make massive returns, and that money is getting sent back to China. And they're making their country rich off of investments that have real value. The United States, on the other hand, I know I've been going off.
No, you're fine. You're fine. There's a question on my mind, though, here, which is for years what we hear in the U.S. is that our businesses are going overseas, right? That our manufacturing is overseas and all this sort of stuff. So to me, that's a little bit of a disconnect with what you're saying. How is it that our businesses are going overseas and yet our laws and other structures are not allowing us to invest overseas? Are those inconsistent or not?
The difference is that these aren't U.S. businesses.
Okay.
The difference is that these are businesses that are going to grow up no matter what. U.S. investment, no U.S. investment. These are businesses, these are the future banks, these are the future infrastructure, these are the future Walmarts and Targets, and these are the future businesses that are growing up out of these countries that we can be a part of that prosperity and that wealth that's being generated.
Okay.
But
you're talking about enabling domestic investment, domestic enterprise in other countries, right?
Yeah, this is new business.
Yeah.
That's happening in other countries. We can invest in their businesses, right? By investing in their businesses, the opportunity to generate income among these there are really high investment potential opportunities. What we can do is we can talk to the people in America who are like, where do I put my money? There's nothing safe here, right? And we can say, well, let us invest some of that money into some of these businesses that are really growing because of sound macroeconomic principles.
Okay. So just looking at how much time we've got left in the show, I want to make sure I give you the opportunity to explain what are these sort of outdated, antiquated systems or structures or laws that we have here that are impeding this.
Yeah. Let me finish one quick point here.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then we'll dive into that.
Okay.
So the difference between what's happening in these developing countries and the United States is that the United States is driven based off of like consumerism and debt, We're spending too much, and the average person has $17,000 of like credit card debt, right? Our economy is really flimsy, and we can actually strengthen our economy by investing into other countries and bringing that wealth back. That means that for a short period of time, what would happen to like the stock market, for example, is that we would have this super overinflated stock market. What would happen is that our markets would dip down slightly for a little bit, and we would all have to be on the same page. We know things are going to dip down for a little bit before they really start to take off, right? If we don't do that, though, what will happen is our markets, which are really high right now, are not going to just dip down. They're going to crash really rapidly. And there's not going to be any type of safety net. There's not going to be any type of way to get out of that. So I believe that if we were to change these policies that we're about to talk about, what we could see in the US economy into the near future is like, sure, we could see a brief lull that leads into massive like economic growth for the US economy. And it could save us from a tremendous economic collapse. So that's why these are important, these policies. So now the background on how I came up with these ideas is that they were completely prophesied through me. I wasn't even thinking about politics until Truth and Liberty last year, my first year at CARES, right? And so you actually were a huge part of inspiring me to get into the political game. And then as I began writing my book around like April and May of last year, the Lord started to speak to me. He's like, your government chapter, which is chapter 16 of the book, this is the most important chapter in the entire book as a whole, right? He's like, this is going to do great things. I think he's really pulling me towards the United Nations right now. And so he started to speak to me, this is how these different government organizations need to be restructured. So to give you some context of how I began prophesying these things, I actually wrote my book in a tent, staying up all night, receiving information from the Lord. And he told me there's 5 government institutions that need massive transformation if these plans are going to be successful. The number one thing is the Federal Reserve. It's probably what we should spend the most time talking about. So the Federal Reserve is it's a part of the government, but it's also not. It's actually a for-profit organization that governs all of our monetary policy and decides on the interest rates that banks get to charge. Now, the U.S. Treasury works with the Federal Reserve by issuing money from the U.S. Treasury to the biggest banks in America, the Federal Reserve banks, and then those banks issue money to other big banks in America and some international big banks, and then those banks lend to smaller banks, and those banks lend to smaller banks until finally you're in Africa, you're at the smallest banks in Africa, and then you get below the smallest banks in Africa, you get the microfinance institutions. If I were to go, knowing that our company in Africa is sound, right? Like economically sound. If I were to go to a bank in Africa and say, hey, we want to take out a loan, they would charge me 36% interest per year.
Wow.
For a company that has multi-million-dollar cash flow, right? So the reason why is because there's so many middlemen, right? The Federal Reserve banks get the cream of the crop, and then there's all these middlemen taking a cut before finally it comes down to these people. And at 36%, think about the individual now. What interest are they paying? They don't take out mortgages. They really don't. There are some small like housing loans and things like that, but it's not a common practice really. Car loans, no way. Like you're not getting a car loan. If that was the way the US operated, we would look like a developing nation, you know? So they're super disenfranchised in the way that they live, both as individuals and as businesses.
So the US Federal Reserve System actually affects banking around the world.
Around the world.
Not just here in America.
Amen.
Wow.
100%. The system was designed by us, for us, right? I have a new idea for a system that's designed by us, also for us and the world, right? And actually, it was designed, let me rephrase that. The Federal Reserve System was designed by the richest people in America for the richest people in America.
Yeah, right.
And I recommend that we switch it around so it's not just for the richest people in America, but it benefits all Americans.
Okay.
And the way that would work is basically, if you stopped giving the richest bankers in the world exclusive access directly to the US Treasury, and you said any bank around the world that's creditworthy can begin borrowing from the US Treasury at a risk-adjusted return, meaning that the interest rate that the Fed sets would be dependent based upon the creditworthiness of that bank, The United States could then profit off of the entire global banking system. I mean, we've got the best asset in the world, which is the US dollar. We get to make the money of the world, essentially. 51% of all global transactions, international transactions, happens in US dollars. We're the world reserve currency, and the euro right now is being super threatened, especially with France about to collapse, right? But as the printer of the world reserve currency, we can fund these banks that are like really cash strapped, and we can make money off of what is the most profitable industry in the entire world. Like, there's a reason why all the skyscrapers in the world, they're owned by banks, and all these middlemen are making a huge amount of cash, and the only people in America who are really benefiting from that are the richest bankers. When instead the Treasury, which represents the wallet of the U.S. people, could bring in. I couldn't even put a number on how much money that would be, but I bet you we could wipe out the national debt if we were to transform the Federal Reserve and be like, we're gonna bring the whole banking system underneath the hood of the way the Fed works.
I'm not smart enough, don't know enough about international finance to know if what you're saying is accurate or not. What I can say is I look forward to learning more about that and figuring that out. What's super cool is just watching your enthusiasm and your excitement as a young man diving into these things, and your faith in God to lead you into these like deep waters, man. And like, your confidence in Him to use your life for His kingdom and glory in these areas. It's awesome to watch. But there's some other areas, not just Federal Reserve. So tell us more. What else is making the rich richer and holding us back? So
another thing that probably affects the most people in America is the way that the IRS works for international citizens, right? So if someone, like, you don't even have to be an international investor. If you just want to go retire somewhere, like right now, Panama is like the #1 place to retire on a lot of places. It's like, if you want to go live in Panama as a retiree, even if you have you make no money inside of the United States still wants you to document, send them a tax filing and pay taxes on any money that you do make outside of the US, right? This is a huge hindrance for anyone who wants to go internationally, because now they have to file taxes over here in Uganda, and even though their business is in Uganda, I have to file taxes also in America for my business that's in Uganda. And this is not a cheap filing. This is an expensive filing, which makes retiring abroad a huge problem, and doing business abroad an even bigger problem, right? And so the United States and another country, Kuwait, those are the only two countries in the world that do this, where they tax citizens outside of their own country. And Kuwait caps their taxation at 4%. The United States, on the other hand, is just like, no, we're taking all your money, it doesn't matter, we're taxing you at the standard percentage, right? Yeah. So this is a practice that only the United States does, and because of that, there are so many people that are looking to give up their U.S. citizenship because they feel like they're being shackled. It's no longer a privilege, but like a bondage to the United States, because I don't have the freedom to be able to live where I want, do what I want outside of this country. Why am I shackled down? And one of the biggest indicators that this is a massive problem that I have found is that there's a YouTube channel called Nomad Capitalist with over 1 million subscribers, and their primary focus is on teaching U.S. citizens how to give up their U.S. citizenship so that they can live abroad, do business abroad, and things like that.
Wow.
That's 1 million people actively looking into giving up their U.S. citizenship.
Yeah. So the IRS, any changes we make there sound good to me. No. Just kidding. Not anything. But okay. What else is there?
Yeah. So the other thing is the SEC.
All right.
Now, the SEC stands for the Securities and Exchange Commission, and this governs how entrepreneurs raise capital in America.
Right.
Now, the SEC is super strict because some Wall Street guys abused it back in the day, right? But today, it's super strict even for little entrepreneurs, little guys like me. So when I first started Mavule, I wanted to raise $250,000. But before I could raise $250,000, in order to legally do that, I spent $60,000 on legal fees and documents before I raised any money at all. And that's not just because I'm an international business, although being an international business makes it even harder. In fact, in some cases, there are many international companies and international funds, great investment opportunities that U.S. citizens would love to be a part of. They can't access those funds because these funds will say, we will take money from anyone as long as you're not a U.S. citizen. That's happening all around the world. They're doing amazing projects.
That's because they don't want the difficulty and expense of complying with SEC regs.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if they fail to comply, they could end up in jail.
Yeah.
So me, as I was 22 when I started Mavule, I had to spend $60,000 on legal fees, and then I had to figure out how not to get thrown in jail in order to run my business.
Right.
So there's massive changes that need to happen there. It's so complicated though. Like lawyers, the average lawyer fee is typically $500 an hour because these people, it's just a very complicated system. So I'm not going to share my recommendations. You can get the book if you want to learn a little bit more about that. But that's the SEC.
Okay.
Now, another organization that not many people have heard of is the DFC, the Development Finance Corporation.
Okay.
And this is a development bank. So this is the department of the US government that is saying, we recognize there's a lot of opportunity internationally. We should be investing in those people. Let's figure out how to do a little bit of what China's doing. But we're so inefficient at the way that we do it that I actually applied for a DFC loan, and I ended up giving up on the process because it took too long, and they don't have a streamlined process.
Wow. Okay.
So my recommendation...
Go ahead. We're down to 2 minutes left. So
Okay. My recommendation there is that we stop having a bunch of people out in Washington, like white guys in Washington, trying to figure out if a business in Africa is creditworthy or not, like ready for investment, and we partner with the banks, the local investors on the ground there. And once again, get the book if you want to learn how exactly to do that.
So again, the book is called
Teach a Man to Fish.
Teach a Man to Fish, and the website
is tam2f.org.
TMA.
TAM2F.
TAM2F. Okay. I don't have it written down, so I'm losing it. But okay. Awesome. We'll put that on the screen, and everybody needs to get a copy of that. So Clark, this is super exciting. What do you, if people want to connect with you, not just read your book, but they want to be a part of Mavule or microfinance or want to learn more about how to invest in developing nations, where should they go?
I would say email info@tam2f.org.
Okay.
That's probably the best way to get a hold of us. And then we're also on all the social medias.
Okay.
And this is a fresh launch. Like I said, I've been in microfinance now for over 7 years through Mavule, through my on the ground, doing the dirty work organization in Africa. But Teach a Man to Fish is a new ministry.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit that's launching right now. And so if you want to become a part of the launch, you can be one of our first followers on social. You'll see they're all pretty fresh.
Okay.
So
awesome. And just so you guys know, Clark's book, Billy Epperhart, the CEO of Andrew Womack Ministries, who has been extremely successful in real estate development and investing, has written the foreword to Clark's book. So I have confidence that that this is God's got great plans for him, and I'm just super excited to have had you on the show today. And for everybody who's watching, be sure to check out get his book, check out his ministry, and pray about what the Lord would have you to do to be a part of what's going on. I wanted to mention as well, our free product giveaway is Andrew's booklet, Spirit, Soul, and Body. Of course, he's got a larger teaching on this. This is just a condensed version of it. This is foundational to the revelation that God has given him. It will change your life. I promise you that. In fact, you can't even understand the Bible if you don't understand Spirit, Soul, and Body. So go to truthandlibertygtn.com today. Share your email with us, and we'll send this to you for free. God bless you all. Thank you so much for watching today, and we'll see you next time here on Truth and Liberty.